And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink.
Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points.
No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there.
But Coach, we have another half to play.
I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that?
Yes, Coach.
Great. Sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Sterlingsoap.com.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to Award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I'm your host, Rick Loayza, and this is a podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you the story of Max Zaslofsky, the player who led the NBA in scoring during the second season of the NBA. We did an episode a while back on Jumpin' Joe Fulks, the player who led the NBA in scoring during the first season of the league in 1946-47, and that was episode 271, by the way, in case you want to go back and check it out. Well, now we are doing a story on the player who led the league in scoring during the second season of the league in 1947-48. Zaslofsky was born in 1925 in Brooklyn, New York. He later went to St. John's University right there in New York City. However, he only played 18 games there. He was a top scorer, and when he graduated from St. John's, a brand new basketball league was just announced. The league was originally called the Basketball Association of America, or the BAA, but just 3 years later, it renamed itself the National Basketball Association, or NBA. Zaslofsky went to play with the Chicago Stags, one of the original NBA teams that went out of business after 4 seasons of competition. Now, back then, the NBA determined the league's leading scorer by total points scored, not by scoring average like they do today. Zaslofsky was averaging 21 points per game that season for the Stags, which was a staggering amount of points per game, especially considering that the entire team only averaged 73 points per game. Now, here's the funny thing about that season. Jumpin' Joe Fulks, who led the league in scoring during the first season, was averaging 22 points per game during that second season. That is 1 point per game more than Zaslofsky. But like I said, the league counted total points scored to determine the league leader in scoring. So while Fulks had a higher scoring average, he only played in 43 games due to injuries. In the meantime, Zaslofsky had played in all 48 games that were on the schedule that season for the league. Now that means that at the end of the regular season, Zaslofsky had 1,007 points, and Fulks only had 949 points. Zaslofsky was officially the scoring champ of 1948. But how did the team do overall with the league's leading scorer on the team? Well, the Chicago Stags finished with a record of 28-20 in a 48-game season, but because they were tied with both the Baltimore Bullets and the Washington Capitals, they all made the playoffs. So technically speaking, 7 out of the 8 teams in the league made the playoffs that year. The Stags made it all the way to the league semifinal, where they lost 2-0 to the Baltimore Bullets, who were the eventual champions for 1948. In the end, Zaslofsky continued to score well over the next few seasons. He was a scorer that the other teams had to be ready for. He scored at a scorching 35% from the field, which would be considered terrible by today's standards. But it was amazing in those early years of the NBA. But then a funny thing happened during the summer of 1950. Zaslofsky was a figure in the story of how Bob Cousy ended up on the Celtics. During the summer of 1950, the Stags announced that they were going to shut down the team and not return the following season. Now, this means that all of the Stags players were up for grabs, and the NBA decided to have a dispersal draft to best find an equitable way for the Stags players to find a new home with one of the remaining teams in the league. The draft rights to Bob Cousy had bounced around a bit and landed with the Stags. So when the Stags shut down the team, the contracts of Bob Cousy, Max Zaslofsky, and Andy Phillip were available to the other teams. The three players that I just mentioned were the only three that were going to stay in the NBA, as none of the other teams in the league wanted any of the other Stags players. So the commissioner of the NBA at the time, Maurice Podoloff, literally wrote the three names on strips of paper and put them in a hat. The Knicks had the first pick in this scenario. Ned Irish, the owner of the Knicks, reached into the hat and pulled Zaslofsky's name out. And that was great for the Knicks. Zaslofsky was the player that they wanted more than any of the others. Zaslofsky was still a top scorer and could give the Knicks a real lift. The Philadelphia Warriors went next, and Eddie Gottlieb, their owner, pulled out the name of Andy Phillips from the hat, and they were very pleased with that. Now, with the final pick, the Celtics already knew who they were getting. Red Auerbach was shaking his head in disgust because he wanted no part of Bob Cousy. But just to complete the formality, Celtics owner Walter Brown reached into the hat and pulled out Bob Cousy's name. Well, we all know how well it worked out for the Celtics and Cousy. Cousy won an MVP and a whole bunch of championships. But let's get back to the Knicks and their new scorer, Max Zaslofsky. What happened with that combination? Did it work out? In a way, it worked out quite well. With Zaslofsky on the roster, the Knicks went to the NBA Finals for the next 3 years in a row in 1951, 1952, and 1953. In 1951, the Knicks lost the championship to the Rochester Royals. Then, in 1952, they lost to George Mikan and the Minneapolis Lakers. And then they lost to the Minneapolis Lakers again in 1953. Now, while he was with the Knicks, Zaslofsky went to the 1952 All-Star Game. But at the end of the 1953 season, after 3 straight losses in the finals, the Knicks decided to try to rebuild their roster. And they sent Zaslofsky to the Baltimore Bullets, where he played 11 games before they traded him again to the Milwaukee Hawks. Then he only played 9 games with the Hawks before they traded him yet again to the Fort Wayne Pistons, where he played the final 45 games of the season. He would stay with the Pistons for the last 3 years of his career, where his scoring had fallen to around 11 points per game. And then he retired at the age of 30, which was normal back then. Most players wore down their bodies by around the age of 30. Now, some players did stick around until they were 32 or maybe 33, but that seemed to be the absolute limit of basketball career endurance. Medical technology and training methods were not what they are today. Star players today regularly play until they turn 40, but not back then. But Zaslofsky was not done playing just because the NBA didn't want him anymore. He played for 3 more years in a lower league for the Trenton Capitals and the Wilkes-Barre Barons. He would later coach in the ABA as the head coach of the New York Nets for 2 seasons, from 1967 until 1969. And unfortunately, he passed away in 1985 at the age of 59 due to leukemia. But he has cemented his place in basketball history. At the end of the 2025 NBA season, only 37 different players have ever led the NBA in scoring, and Max Zaslofsky is one of them, and that should never be forgotten. And I will end with this. Some basketball people will say things like, Zaslofsky wouldn't be able to even make a modern NBA team. And I would agree with that. I mean, if you brought prime Max Zaslofsky in a time machine to the modern NBA, he would probably be the first player cut and not make the team. Now, at the same time, I do not think that that's a fair comparison. It is like comparing an F1 race car from the 1950s and then putting it against a modern F1 race car to see which one is faster. Well, the modern car has the advantage of 75 years of technological advancements. And in the same way, the modern NBA player has the advantage of 75 years of basketball advancements. And not just advancements in basketball moves and techniques, but also in the understanding of training, nutrition, strength training, stretching, hydration and recovery, medical understanding, surgical advancements that can extend a player's career. Today's player has an enormous advantage over their 1940s counterparts, and that is not Zaslofsky's fault. He was one of the great scorers of his day. He was the best of his era when it came to putting the ball in the basket, and that is all you can ask. So when we talk about some of the great scorers in history, Zaslofsky at least deserves a mention in the conversation. Well, that is it for today. Join us next time when we share another story from basketball history. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find short historical posts, and I will also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories in the past. Take care and see you soon.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.